Hey guys, what's going on? So in this video, we'll be learning about self. I know that self might have thrown many people off the track, and to clarify it, I decided to create this video. So this video will be a really short video, and I'll be explaining you the self a little bit more in detail. So let me actually quickly go ahead and grab that code. Yeah, this is the code that we wrote previously. Okay, so let me quickly go through the code. So we have a class employee, and we have two methods, init and display method, display ID method. The init method takes self as the first argument. Similarly, display ID method also takes self as the first argument. That's because whenever you create a method, you actually have to pass self as the first argument. And we will just look at the reason why in this video also. And inside init, we also have three more arguments, name, ID, and age. And this init method is also known as the initializer method, which runs as soon as we create the object just to initialize instance variables. And by the way, the instance variables are self.name, self.id, and self.age. And then we have the display ID method, which takes self as the first argument and prints us that particular object's ID. So let me quickly go ahead and make use of the display ID. So let me go ahead and print Adam's ID by saying adam.display ID. And let me run it. So it successfully printed 1, 2, 3. And let's take a look what exactly happened here throughout this process. So whenever we create the object Adam, the parameter value Adam 1, 2, 3, and 24 got mapped with that of name, ID, and age of init method. Why it got mapped? So init method runs automatically as soon as you create the object. Hence all these values got mapped automatically. Now what about this self? Well, self, or you could put any name over there instead of self, but by convention we should put self. So this first argument inside every method gets the object automatically. In this case, the first argument over here is self, so self gets the value of Adam object automatically. Similarly, display also get the value of Adam automatically. Okay, so back to init method. So as soon as we created the Adam's object, the attributes got mapped, the instance variables got initialized with these values. So if you look carefully, the self actually got value of Adam, and this actually turns to Adam.name equals to Adam, Adam.id equals to 1, 2, 3, and Adam.age is equals to 24. Similarly, Bob's object is created. Bob's instance variables would also be initialized similarly. Now after that, we called display ID method through Adam. So if we take a look at the display ID method, it has a self which will take in the Adam object since we have called the display ID through Adam, and it returns as the Adam.id, which is actually 1, 2, 3. Now if you remember, I told you that you can use any name instead of self. So let me go ahead and change self to objects maybe, or let us actually put custom name, and if I run it, it will still give me the perfect answer. But I don't recommend you to put custom names, and perhaps sticking with the convention is the best practice possible. Let me go ahead and delete all this. Okay, so we are back at self. Now let's take a step further and understand what exactly happens when we call a method using the object. Okay, so let me go ahead and delete this, and let me clear the screen. Let me comment this one out and say whenever we call the method through the object, say bob.display ID. Note that we don't pass self because self automatically gets the value of the object. In the back end of Python, what exactly happens is this above code gets converted to something like this. Something like employee dot display ID, the method that we called, and inside it passes the arguments, and the first argument is Bob. So we called display ID through Bob, right? So the inside automatically the self argument get assigned with the Bob object. Let me type print and let me copy the code. And if I run it, it will print me the Bob's ID 234, which is perfect. So remember, whenever you call the method through the object, Python converts this into something like this, the class name dot the method that you called, and inside it will pass the first argument through which we invoked this method. That's why we never had to put Bob inside. To show you more clearly, let us go ahead and actually invoke the init method. So init also is a method, right? Let's quickly go ahead and tamper with the init method. So one thing to note about init method is that init method automatically runs as soon as we create the object. That's because init method initializes the instance variables with the arguments that we passed, or you can say with the parameter value that we passed. So we never had to type adam.init, but to show you that we can actually tamper with it, so let me go ahead and tamper with the Adam's ID. So let me call the init method, and inside init, as you know, the first argument is always the object, so we'll pass Adam, and we have 3 more parameter values to be passed. So let's put the name as Adam only because we want to change the ID, right? So let's pass Adam. Now ID, let's pass something like 999, and age, let it be 24. And let's actually remove this print because we don't need it anymore. And if I go ahead and print Adam.displayID, you will notice that we have successfully tampered with the init method as well. So the takeaway is, at the backend, Python converts anything which we write as object.method. Python automatically calls the method like this: employee, the class name, dot the method name, and inside it the first argument is always the object which we use to call the method, and then it will pass the additional arguments if need be. Alright guys, that's all for this video. I hope you really understood about self and you are much more confident working with self now. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. See you guys in the next lecture.